Welcome to the 21st of June. We should all now be pruning. Before this is not desirable, today onwards is perfect. The reason is because the deciduous plants up until the 21st of June, the solstice, have actually been storing all their energy in the roots. What happens from this day onwards is the plant then now takes that stored energy and puts it into the growth of the plant. So what we're going to start off doing is getting ready for rose pruning and show you what to do first with your tools in preparation for rose pruning. I like to use roll handle secateurs. They're about $130 a pair. This handle actually comes off and we'll lubricate that in due course. But what that does is when you're actually using the secateurs, it just saves your hands as such. The other option with secateurs is just use ordinary handled secateurs, for small pruning jobs they're fine. They're about $80, or we use these extensively. What these are is ARS fruit pruners, 300L, about $30 on Amazon or eBay. What they are is a good second string for lighter pruning, harvesting your fruit, doing cutting material. They've got good resharpenable blades. You can get them in stainless steel. We prefer the carbon steel because you can actually sharpen that. The stainless steel is difficult to resharpen, and that's a good alternative. I also use these for some light pruning, but always when I'm pruning roses I use these for the heavier type pruning, the bigger wood, etc. The other thing in discussing tools is we use a good set of loppers for the bigger wood. They require an annual sharpening because they don't use much, and a good pruning saw. The pruning saw is not a push saw, it's a pull saw. So what happens with that is it really rips through that bigger wood as such when you've got those big diameter stems to do on fruit trees, roses, etc. etc. If the roses are prickly, as they can be with some of the varieties, I got myself a set of welding gloves. I normally wear a glove on my left hand because I'm a right-handed pruner. I prefer to use the hand on the secateurs without a glove and use the gloved hand for getting the thorny bits out of the way. But if it's really thorny, a set of cheap welding gloves is always useful. I like to keep my secateurs when finished in a pouch, which I have on a belt, so it's easy access. So I normally load up the pouch with a pair of secateurs and a pair of scissors, like that. And I've got two methods of actually doing the pruning on my job should I need them. Before we sharpen the secateurs, we've got to pull them apart. So the first thing to do is take off the centre nut. This isn't a YouTube video, by the way. If you want to do secateurs, go onto YouTube if you're not sure as such. I've actually loosened the screw that's there, this particular screw, which actually holds that nut in place that I've just shown you. Secateurs then come apart, spring to one side, nut, that, and the blade actually comes off in the filcos. So the first thing we're going to do is, I use a bit of Scotch-Brite, or you can use steel wool, is to actually clean up that blade because it's got lots of gunk on it from the sap on the last round of pruning. And if I'm doing a fair bit of pruning in a day, what I tend to do is to come back and clean that blade off overnight. It just makes the cutting easier when you're doing hundreds in a day, and for the home garden it may not matter so much. So I go through all the parts of the Felco roll handled secateurs and give them a good clean. See what's happening there. This part of it as well. Right, the next thing we're going to look at is the sharpening. I'll just do the nut and the bolt. The next thing we're going to look at is how to sharpen the blades, because they're really good resharpenable blades, and that's the beauty about having a good pair of secateurs. There's lots of other different types of secateurs if your hands aren't so good with notching, so that you can actually use the power of the secateurs through the spring to do bigger cuts. I always tend to use a saw or a pair of loppers rather than try and bust my hands on the bigger wood, but there are secateurs out there that you can actually do that with. What I'm going to try and do with this blade is give it a sharpen on a rub stone. It's got a bit of oil on it, and what I'll be doing is trying to get a fine edge on there, and then what I'll be doing is we use a diamond honing stone. And what that does is that takes the burrs off and gives you a much cleaner cut. If you're not sure how to sharpen things, there's plenty of stores around that sharpen up hand tools, and if you're feeling inadequate or you haven't got a sharpening stone, or you don't want to go through the process of sharpening, just find one of the stores that cut keys and sharpen various things to actually get your sharpening done. That doesn't exclude the cleaning, because that, I think that you should be doing that, you know, after every few days pruning at the very least. So what we'll do is go through and sharpen the blade on an angle, I don't know what degrees that is, maybe 20 degrees. So just with an action like that, getting the front. Yeah, you can move the, thank you. Usually I push it up against something, but the photographer said no today. We've got to be out on the bench on a white sheet. So I've done the front of the blade. I'm now going to try and get the rear. The majority of the cutting is done in a third to the half of the front lot. You only use the back when you've got bigger cuts to do as such. So that's just how you go about doing that particular pruning. I'll just get a piece of rag and wipe the oil off. The diamond stone doesn't like the oil. That's good. And then what I'll do is I'll just run that diamond stone along, getting the rough burrs off both sides, so that there's a smooth edge that is there. Right, we'll put them back together in a moment. Also with the rolled handle ones, I use a bit of CRC, or you can use inox, or there's a whole range of other lubricants that you can actually use. I just use a bit of CRC on the handle so that it works nice and easily. We'll put that back in later, but that inserts in that hole, just pushes straight in, and we'll reassemble the way we disassemble. We'll also give the pruning snips, as I call them, a bit of a clean up. They don't need a sharpen at this point. They've been hidden away from me, so I'm guaranteed that they're in the best of condition. My colleagues like to hide these things on the basis of apparently my reputation in blunting them is not the best, and when they go to use them, they have a blunt tool that they have to sharpen. But anyway, that's a story for another day. So all I've done is just more or less polish those up. The next thing we're going to do with our tool is we're going to show you what you need to put together for a spray to keep some form of cleanliness going with your pruning. So we've just got a small bottle. I think that's about 300 ml roughly. It's got a flammable liquid sign on it, and it's also got a sign for what it is. That's how we delineate them in the workplace. So you've got methylated spirits. Now what we do with our metho is we just buy the 5 litres. You can just buy a simple bottle. But what you can do to get further use out of your metho without diluting the effect of it on the pruning equipment is 70% metho to 30% distilled water. Now we use distilled water because it's the cleanest we can find rather than our dam water. In town you would be fine to use the water out of the tap because it's chlorinated. So what you're going to do is get a measuring jug, work out how much is in the volume of the spray you've got, 70% metho, 30% water out of the tap or distilled water. What we do with that is, after each pruning cut, we spray our equipment. And what that does is stop, if there is any disease problems in fruit or roses or whatever, transferring it to the next cut. So that's a really important issue, because last spring, when it was wet, we had lots of inquiries about why are my roses dying, or why is my fruit trees dying back. And in most instances, it was wet spring, disease problems, people pruning, and then transferring the disease from that pruning cut to the next cut they actually made. We tend to use that rather than sealing cuts, because most of the cuts, even the larger cuts, don't need a sealing compound. Some people have got plenty of time on their hands and can go through with a paintbrush and put a bituminastic seal on various larger cuts that they've made. The only instance I'd probably use that would be if I was pruning apricots, because they have a particular disease, and you're better off to seal off anything that's bigger than a finger diameter as far as the cut goes. But usually and generally the methylated spirits covers everything. Thank you.